Exciting and interesting, this, because it sort of relates to treasure codes and to a religious order, so like, I'll get to that in a minute. Just made a really good video, but I realised I look so lazy. I thought I could try and redo it. But this is all to do with this JJJ Mystery. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll try and explain. But it's all to do with this mysterious. Sorry, I disappeared. I'll come back into the light. It's this like strange thing I've come across in all over Lewes, and it's really odd. It's like in Hamsey specifically is where I first came across it, on the floor of the church. It's a Thomas Partington, I think it is. And it says something about entrance to EY vault. And then it says JJ, 9J. And I wrote to the church warden, who's no longer there now, I don't think, disappeared randomly. I said, why does it say JJ, 9J? You know, what does that mean? Said, it doesn't say that. It's, you know, 11 something or other, or 19 or 17, 91, or... And I was like, no, clearly, you know, and then I went back. I've been back many times. It's clearly 3Js, like, you know, with 9. Clearly, you know, there's like no question about it. So yeah, I was like thinking, why? Because their denial's a bit odd. Like, first of all, their denial's a little bit strange, and then secondly, it is there. What does it mean? Like, and why is it there? Why not just use ones? And I couldn't work out what it meant. So, and I hadn't. There was no other information that I could get. So when I looked it up, you know, you just type in JJ, 9J, it doesn't mean bloody anything. You know, there's no, there is no reference to what that could indicate it being regarding. So I was like, okay, right, that's very odd. But then I went off to, I think the next one I found was at Beddingham Church. So I was in Beddingham Church looking around, and I noticed a tombstone that's upright. And I was looking down it, and then when you get to, I think it's 1770 odd, there's a video up on Beddingham Church, and I do go over it, and I think it's around 1770 that this J's appear again, and it's a similar thing. It's like JJ something J, and they're the exact same J's in the same kind of setup. It's like one big one with a kind of flare, and then a kind of slightly different one, it's just slightly different and smaller, and then a kind of similar one to that at the end with a number in the third. The third one is a number, and they're all supposed to be like, you know, in reference to other things, but there's like, you know, I was like, does a J mean a number? Like, you know, other than the fact that it, you know, it will be a particular number in the alphabet. But then there's 3 of them, unless it's a 1. Again, I was like, what is this thing? And anyway, I was like, so I've seen this twice now, and I'm like, that's really odd. Never seen this anywhere else in the whole of the country. Like, but there's 2 suddenly that I found around Lewes, and I'm like, that's really weird, and I still can't find out what it means. Be prepared to go down a deep rabbit hole with me here, because this is seriously, like, I've been researching this all day, so you're going to need some time. But it's quite exciting and interesting, this, because it sort of relates to treasure codes and to a religious order, so like, I'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, that was the second one, and then I was going along Southover High Street one day, and I'm looking at this big church. It's where William, Warren and Gundrada, their tombs were got from the priory, and they were put into a little kind of room in this huge church along Southover High Street. And I was looking up at the wall, and I was like, there it is again, JJ something J. You can go and look at all these things yourself, like, you know, and I was like, that is weird. So there's 3 now. 3. Like, and then I started looking it up again, couldn't find anything. It just says like JavaScript, which is interesting actually. We'll come back to that. That's something that we'll come right back to that later on. But that was the only reference that I could really find. And then I was like, okay, this is really odd. Now, then the other day I went for so that was the 3rd one. Still no idea what this thing means and why it's in Lewes or around Lewes and no other place. But the other day I just went for a wander again. I walked in through the top of town, down through the Grange. and popped out down on the other corner. I'm sure loads of you have been through there. And then I turned left. I thought, I don't think I've ever been down this road, so I just wandered off down there. As I'm walking along, I look up and there's a bloody another stack with this exact same thing again. It says JJ 4J. I was just like, what? And then I looked down, it says meeting house. And I was like, okay, right. You know, we might be getting somewhere now. Meeting house. So I've got 4 references to this J's now. And I've got this reference saying meeting house on this one near the Grange. So it's like, okay, maybe it's got something to do with the religious order. It was around about then, you know, this sort of 1700, 1770 period, French Revolution time. And it turns out that I eventually was like, I've got to find out what this means today. And I was just like, initially started off, just this thing popped up and it started talking about, this is so crazy, started talking about the secret codes of treasure maps from the Jesuits. And I was like, okay, right, that's weird, I've never heard of this concept before. So I started looking into them, because it's a Spanish thing. And it turns out the Jesuits are kind of they come from someone who worships, you know, they came from something that worshipped a guy called Ignatius, who's a Spaniard who had a kind of mystical experience and decided to they became like a branch of the Catholic Church, this is kind of like, they appear to be good guys, but I think in the background they certainly haven't been in the past. And this is where it gets really interesting, especially with regards to Lewes. So you have, this is really hard for me to remember all of this. This Ignatius thing. Then it turns out the Quakers also kind of venerate Ignatius. But the 3 J's in Jesuits is something to do with like justice, Jesus, and something else, you know, it's not particularly important, but there is a reference to the 3 J's with the Jesuits, and I was like, okay, well, at least I've got something to do with something that seems to be linked to this meeting place. And from what I can tell, like, the Quakers are kind of all right, especially the ones that are in Lewes. They seem to be like, you know, friends of the Quakers, and the tenets that they talk about seem to be really good, you know, excellent ideas. It's like, you know, should be down to your own mystical experience, and it all sounds really great. But then if you look, you know, in the first videos you'll find on them, like, oh yeah, aren't we lovely, you know, I'm just a lovely old priest who, yeah, worships this Ignatius and, you know, likes, you know, the idea of a mystical experience through your own practice, and that all sounds fantastic. But then if you look into the past of them, you find out that they're almost like the worst of the secret societies that there has ever been. They've been kind of like infiltrating so many different churches, schools, politics, basically anyone that they could get, and that they could kind of subvert to their way of thinking. They infiltrated churches and then started preaching their own kind of doctrines. And the way they kind of took power, it's almost like a kind of secret Catholicism, really. And I think they're represented by the Black Pope. Don't quote me on that as well. Like, you know, there's a few things that I don't actually know for sure. So, like, this is just the way I'm looking at it right now from what I've learned about it all. And I think it's something to do with this Black Pope, which again, like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know that exists. And I don't think the Black Pope likes being called the Black Pope. It's kind of interesting. He's not black. He just, I don't even know what it is. Perhaps it's like the shadow side is the implication. I really don't understand. But anyway, they've been quite sort of underhand, dark, and have subverted, you know, they say they're against kind of authority, which I am. They say they're against all this, but they've done all this subversion, and then they've, you know, if that's the case, then they've just used it all and enslaved everyone themselves, which is like, yeah, that old Thomas Paine thing. Is there such a thing as a government without the devil in it? I don't think there is. Like, you know, they may have even gone into it with good cause, but then you end up with someone kind of like Epsteining someone else. I'll call it that from now on, you know, like basically blackmailing from behind to keep power over people. It happens all the time, you know, so it's not like it's not an unknown thing, and it's not so far-fetched that you couldn't believe that it's happened all through history. So, like, you know, I mean, why do you think we haven't got any of that information still? It's because it's all being run by these people who are all corrupt and running the world. But then we come back to the Jesuits and Lewes, and what you find is that the Jesuits were responsible for kind of getting hold of people that were of influence in schools and that kind of thing, and then bringing them up into their society. They probably give them special treatment, lots of money, lots of, you know, everything that they could possibly want, but then they're theirs, you know, and they do what they're told. And you know, I've always thought that Lewes was under the control of like Masons, really, and that they weren't that great. Now I'm starting to think actually it's probably got something to do with the Jesuits, who are in control of the Masons. And then at the top of the high street, so the Jesuits also have something to do with Antioch, and then the secret societies, you know, the Masons, who are up there. Like, there's a building there, so it's not just like a conspiracy. Like, they're there, you can go in and have a look, and they, you know, there's about 6 different societies that run from that. But what's interesting is, like, directly opposite them is Sussex Archaeology. That is where Thomas Paine used to live, but it's also where another guy called Walter Godfrey lived for a little while. He is the architect for Temple Church in London after it got bombed in the Blitz. I've said this a few times, sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's important links. So you've got this Masonic thing, this big Jesuit link in the background, all these J's spread around Lewes, Thomas Paine's house, and then Thomas Paine has a little, like, this is where we go down we go from a rabbit hole into a wormhole. You have, like, Thomas Paine, who knew Jefferson and George Washington. And I was watching this guy, if you want to go even further down into some serious rabbit holes, look into a guy called Howdy Mikowski, who's on YouTube, and he's put up these incredible talks where he's just, like, gone so deep into so many subjects, but especially around the chateau. And it's in this that he mentions that they may have been there, Jefferson and Washington, and that's kind of important in relation to my stuff in Lewes. But yeah, I think it's got something to do with the Jesuits and the founding fathers, who kind of seem to have, it's something they say about the original setup of America is it was for their own peculiar reasons, like an experiment or something. It's really strange. And I think that you know, they're all Freemasons, the kind of founding fathers, and the plaque states that, you know, they are in service to Freemasonry, you know, so like democracy, if you like, is Freemasonry over there, basically. And, you know, this is all kind of like, I think it's known pretty much. Probably a load of people just will never accept it because it's like, you know, they'd have to admit that everything's a little bit hooky, and I think people want to kind of believe that the world's really straight up. It's like, you know, it's certainly not that. But then you've got St Clair, so right, you've got the Masonic Centre, you've got Sussex Archaeology, you've then got next to them St Clair House, and that's the school. Now, so if you know anything about the Templars, you'll know about St Clair, the family St Clair and Rosslyn Chapel, which again links to this Templar treasure myth. But opposite there you have Antioch House, which is linked to the Jesuits. This is within like 100 feet of each other, all these 4 buildings, and this place where kind of Thomas Paine was doing his writings, and the Headstrong Club at the White Hart, and the beginnings of Parliament, I think, you know, like the Battle of Lewes, all these things were kind of like the beginnings of a lot of democracy. Or is it really? I kind of personally now, I feel like everything's inverted. They call it democracy, but really it's communism now, because, you know, they call it 2 parties, really it's 1 party. You know, there's control at different levels. Everything they say is the reverse, basically, of what it is. You know, like, oh, we're doing things for the environment, which means they're robbing you blind and polluting the world. You know, like, it's endless sort of like double talk. Whenever I hear them speak, I just basically think now, politicians, I just think it's the opposite. whatever you're saying is probably the opposite, you know, like, oh, God, I don't believe a word you say anymore, you know, for good reason, but so many people still put their faith in them, like, the more fool them, like, that's up to them. But you've got this massive, heavy link. Then I found out that, so I type in Jesuit churches Lewes, or Jesuits Lewes, you can do this if you want to, and it pops up with 4 churches, and one of them St Anne's, and then I started reading about that, and it turns out that the Sussex Archaeological Society are probably, they are part owners of this church, St Anne's, and it's like, what? Why is an archaeological society that is always pleading poverty somehow in control of a big church in Lewes now? Like, what? They'll be like, oh, it's just to do with preservation. It's like, well, how did you afford to do that? Like, you know, you can't even do carbon tests for things until 10 years after you found them, let alone buy a church or bail it out somehow. So what's that? You know, like, you start to see all these Jesuit kind of underhand connections, and I've long thought that there is some underhand thing going on there, big time. You know, and it's like, and I think it's not just, you know, almost the Masons are kind of a cover for the Jesuits, it seems, who are, they kind of, you have to look into this guy called George Fox, who founded something to do with Quakerism, or the Quakers. It looks like it's Quackers. It's quite funny, I thought that. But again, all of their kind of initial tenets, and, you know, don't go persecuting anyone because of it, because I think the initial tenets of those things are great. But the reality is, for the people at the top of those things, it's like, it's not what they say it is. It's about subversion, control, not decent, you know, like indoctrination, making sure everyone's in their club. That's all to do with the Catholic Church, who are kind of really, you know, it seems like they've been trying to assert power, and there's been this power struggle for centuries, you know, like since the 1300s, really. And then before that, it was different sort of struggles, but from the 1300s, it seems to be that it's kind of Vatican-based skullduggery. But yeah, another thing that was quite interesting was that these J's, 2 J's that are slightly different in this symbol book of treasure symbols of the Jesuits, means tunnels beneath, which I thought was kind of interesting. If you've been following anything else that I've been talking about, I just thought, that's the only time, but there's only 2 J's next to each other, which they are, I suppose, but then there's like 9J. But it's very interesting that they kind of seem to have subverted all of that top of the high street. And I'd say, you know, then you've got the other one, and they own the castle and not, and yet they can't afford to do a simple carbon dating test or get some of those results out. It's like, it's all a bit, it's super suspicious, isn't it? Like, you know, and they are subverting democracy, basically. That's what they're doing, it seems to me. It's not just them, you know, there's like, I'd say it goes way further up the line than that. And you can see why there were such brutal persecutions now. When I've now become aware of this, I'm like, that shouldn't really be allowed. And then you can see how then people would get really angry about that if they knew about it. And suddenly you start trying to draw these people out, and then there are burnings and hangings and like, you know, you've been fucking us for all this time kind of stuff. And, you know, you're trying to do that through deceptive means. I think there's something to do with the Jesuits and the Fire of London, which, if you know anything about that, that might have been like one of the big like resets, you know, of, it seems like there's been so many. I think the First World War was another one. You know, it's like you kind of kill everybody off, and then you invest in the new children that have come up. You know everything that's happened in the past, or your order does, and you teach whatever you want them to believe. But we seem to have got to a point now where information is just there, you know, like you can find so much out from old sources as well. Like Google Books is amazing. If you ever get, if you ever want to kind of like really find something out, I think you need to look at old sources now. You can't look at kind of modern material. This is why I'm just trying to present you ideas. I don't know if any of this is like 100%, but it's interesting stuff to consider. And now I've got an answer to this J thing, or it seems like I have, which is, and I think it is to do with the Jesuits, who I don't think are really very good, especially at the top, you know, like, but you shouldn't go persecuting anybody really, because the people at the bottom might not have a clue. That's probably highly likely, you know, like they just think, great, you know, like we're doing the right thing, and they probably are decent people. It's the people at certain higher levels that are keeping all this kind of skullduggery, subversion, indoctrination. You know, you can see that in like Disney now, can't you? And how far they've gone beyond the pale of woke. You know, it's becoming kind of filthy now. It's a bit disgusting. And I think that's on purpose. I feel like that's all being done on purpose to sort of degrade society and degrade morality and degrade family units and sort of destroy decency. And so, well, why would you want to do that? And it's kind of, it's dark, you don't want to go down that road, but like, you know, I think that is the truth, you know, like clearly it is. And I think it's trying, well, the main one I think is when we look at the Epstein world and all those people and why that information hasn't come out. What they're trying to do right now is make perversion acceptable, make all of this disgusting stuff familiar and normal, so that when they come out, people will be like, oh, well, you know, I've seen that 900 times on Disney on a children's program now, so it doesn't make any odds. That is the reality of it, I'm afraid. You know, it's utterly disgusting. And, you know, these people are, I'm sure initially those things might have been set up for decent, maybe, I don't really know though, like, you know, it seems like it's all a bit pervy and odd. You know, and then there's this thing to do with, this is something loads of people might not know, but look up a guy called Peter Ball and look up where he was and who he knew. So there's one that isn't spoken about. You should look him up. I'm not going to say anything because I'll probably get this wiped, and I'd like people to actually watch it. But yeah, I told you this is going to be a deep rabbit hole. So like, but yeah, look up Peter Ball. I think it was Thomas Becket Church down at the bottom. And then I won't say that because there's like now new people doing stuff, and I don't want to kind of like persecute anyone really, you know, like but at the same time I want people to be aware of the possible reality of what's going on and why things are run in a certain way there. It's all a bit odd, you know, like, but I think they're all, most of the kind of high-powered people in this world are Epsteined. You know, they've been honey-trapped, bribed, or they've been indoctrinated and brought up into the family, blackmailed. That's the system we're running under now, you know, like, and it is mafia style. It's interesting because that's from Italy. Like, I wonder if they've probably got a link to the Vatican. I can bet you can bet. That's very interesting. I hadn't actually ever thought of that, but that's where they originated, right outside the Vatican walls, apparently. I should think again, that probably initially came about as, you know, I feel like now we're living in the same world as, you know, just extortion scams. Oh, you parked in the wrong place, that's 30 quid if you don't pay me. Now, if you do pay me, I'll reduce it by half to 30 quid. But if you don't, it's 75. And then if you don't, I'll double it. And if you don't, I'll double it because you parked in the wrong place. And obviously, and then if you still don't pay, I'll come and take all of your property. Like, and that is now considered normal. And it's like, you know, not to me. But yeah, like, you know, it's like, pardon me? Are you serious? That is extortion. You do understand I'm a free human being, and, you know, it's innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. And that you can't just go extorting the public because they parked in the wrong place. You can't just go and steal all their stuff and send in bailiffs and make people live in fear because they parked in the wrong place. This is where we've got to because of these people, and that's like councils. And then you imagine where all that money's going, being embezzled and wasted, and to the friends of the Masons, builders who have taken that £1 million contract to do that bridge, and they did some expansion joints and sprayed some stuff on there. It was £1 million and a week's night closures, and you can't see a single thing that's changed. It's like there's corruption at every single level of government, and yeah, they're just robbing from the public, constantly robbing. And these are people that are supposed to be about justice, Jesus. But I don't think that people in the lower echelons of these organisations really understand. Anyway, this is a really long video, and I hope I've kept your attention for long enough for you to even get to this point, because this is like an insanely deep topic. But I'm going to go off to these other churches now and see if I can find any more of these strange 3J things. And yeah, once I've got any more, I'll go and take pictures of them all so you can see one picture, and then I'll put it all up in one quick video, so that you can see them all. And then I'll check the other churches and make sure, I'll see if I can find something there. I bet you I can. And then from there I'll put them up, and then at least we've got some sort of answer and the information on the Jesuits and the Quakers, and I'll put it all up in one little video where I won't talk so much, but I'll just put the information up, and then you can check it all out yourself and deep dive and look into it. But yeah, what a weird, that has been a hell of a rabbit hole I've gone down there. Even that treasure thing's quite interesting. It's made me think about some of the other things in Lewes that I'm kind of keen on looking at now in a slightly different way, like all over Lewes and the countryside around it, and like something to do over spring. I'll keep you involved. Take it easy, everyone.